Reading with your kids.
Hola, ni hao, konnichiwa, assalamu alaikum, shalom, jambo, bienvenidos. Hi, my name is Jedley, and this is the Reading with Your Kids podcast, an iHeartRadio Best Kids and Family Podcast Award nominee. We are coming to you from the beautiful neighborhood of Reedville in the southwest corner of Boston, Massachusetts. Our guest today is also coming to us from the Boston area. In fact, right outside of Boston. His name is Tom O'Toole, and he is the author of The Crabapple Tree. This episode of the Reading with Your Kids podcast is brought to you by Noasaurus by Elaine Kylie Kearns. Do you know someone who is a Noasaurus? Is your child a Noasaurus? Does your child ever have one of those days where they wake up and the answer to everything is no? Well, have I got a picture book for you. Noasaurus by Elaine Kylie Kearns. Noasaurus woke up one morning feeling very no. No to brushing his teeth, no to eating, and definitely no to playing with his little brother. Things only get worse when Noah goes for a walk and discovers that the relentlessly cheerful Toby Rex, Brian Brontosaurus, and Ava Ceratops are following him. Together, the group start a bona fide dino parade that even Noah cannot resist. This lighthearted, whimsical story will have readers laughing along at Noah and his friends, as well as their own bad moods. This hilarious book pairs two of kids' favorite things, saying no and dinosaurs. Adults can also relate to waking up on the wrong side of the bed and feeling very no all day long, too. Noasaurus is available on Amazon and at Elaine's website, ElaineKylieKearns.com. This episode of the podcast is also sponsored by Kid Curated Books. Kid Curated Books is an online service that offers monthly book subscriptions for children ranging in age from infants to teenagers. Now, before you go, don't give me that rolling your eyes stuff. This is not just another subscription box. Let me tell you how Kid Curated Books is different. Kid Curated Books doesn't just send each child the same tired old book box. In fact, seldom are two boxes ever identical. That's because Kid Curated Books understands and respects that no kids are identical. Based on a survey completed during the initial subscription and based on subsequent feedback from the kids, Kid Curated Books creates a custom book box designed especially for your child that will engage, excite, and absolutely educate them. Now, I really love the fact that each monthly delivery arrives in a colorful box that is packaged like a present and addressed directly to the child. The kids love that. Subscribe to Kid Curated Books today, and we will provide amazing reading for your kids no matter what their age. Not ready to commit to a subscription? That's cool. Kid Curated Books also offers an array of gift boxes for baby showers, holidays, and birthdays. Check it out today by visiting their website, kidcuratedbooks.com. And we also want to let you know that this episode of the Reading with Your Kids podcast is brought to you by the Queen Vernita Visitor Series by author Don Minge. This is a fun and educational series of 9 books that your family will absolutely love. You are all going to love following the Queen and her 12 subjects as they explore a new and exotic region every new year. The Queen's subjects teach her all about stalagmites, sharks, seahorses, glaciers, volcanoes, and so much more. Now, as a special education teacher, Dr. Don Minge's books touch on disabilities such as Down syndrome, Rett syndrome, cerebral palsy, deafness, visual impairment, and autism. These are great books that will help your kids understand that somebody with a physical or intellectual challenge is a person who can be a great friend too. Now, Pam Schneider has provided bright, colorful, whimsical illustrations that perfectly complement the text. The Queen Vernita Visitor Series will make a great addition to any classroom or child's library. Check it out today. The Queen Vernita Visitor Series by author Dr. Don Minge. Joining us on the line right now from literally down the street from the Reading with Your Kids studios in beautiful Norwood, Massachusetts. He is the author of The Crabapple Tree. Please welcome to the show, Tom O'Toole. Tom, how are you?
I'm very well, Jedley. Thanks for having me on your show.
Really excited. Tom lives just a stone's throw away from the gym where I just came from. In fact, you probably, I probably sweat as I go by your house every day, and it's great to have a fellow Bostonian on the show, and I'm really excited to learn about the crabapple tree.
Great.
So tell us about the story and tell us what inspired you to write the story.
Sure. So I was living in Roslindale. I moved to Roslindale in 2017. I lived a 5-minute walk from the Arboretum, and really one of my first days walking from my apartment to the Walter Street gate of the Arboretum, the idea just popped into my head. I don't know how or why, maybe divine intervention, write a story about a fruit tree. And as I was walking, memories flooded my mind of childhood memories of when we moved into our home in Billerica, Massachusetts, the first house my parents were able to buy, and they still live there, and how there were apple trees in the backyard and a pear tree. Mm-hmm. And so these memories flooded my mind, and then I got to the Arnold Arboretum. I went into the Walter Street gate. I walked up to the top of Peters Hill and the Arboretum, and literally was standing overlooking a crabapple tree orchard that I didn't know was there. I was reading a placard saying, "You're looking at a crabapple tree orchard on the slope of Peters Hill that was planted here in the 1940s and 1950s by colonial farmers." So that day, it just the idea sparked, and I got really excited about it, the memories of growing up, and also there's some pain involved in the story that I can tell you about, but that's where it started on that one day in August of 2017 when I was walking to the Arboretum and I was looking at a crabapple tree orchard, and I started thinking about my childhood growing up in a home where there were apple trees in the backyard.
Really cool. And for folks who don't know about it, because you're listening to a couple of city guys talking about places they're very familiar with. and it's beautiful. The Arnold Arboretum is an absolutely beautiful place. It's a beautiful part of Boston. And I remember my mom telling the first time I was going to visit it, I was living just a mile or so away in beautiful Jamaica Plain, Massachusetts, another neighborhood of Boston. And she said, "It's a tree museum." And I thought that was a kind of weird kind of image in my mind. I was thinking of going into a building where these trees are going, but no, it's this just beautiful park. And, it's just a real gem of Boston. So what a beautiful place for a story to be born.
Yeah, absolutely. It really is a beautiful park managed by Harvard University, and you're absolutely right. I love that description, a tree museum, because there are trees that are planted there from different parts of the world, and it's just beautiful. It can be very, very serene and tranquil, and beautiful view of the skyline of Boston. So it was a great place for this story to be born.
Mm-hmm. So tell us about the story.
So the story really is about marginalization. It's about growing up and in one way or another being convinced that something is wrong with you. The story is generally for kids who in some way feel like they're marginalized. Maybe a kid who loves music but is told by their parents, well, you can't be a musician because musicians never make money. Or maybe a child who loves basketball but is told, you can't play basketball, you're a girl. Or maybe it's about, in my case, it was a boy who was growing up who ended up being gay. Had a relationship with God, a close and intimate relationship with my Creator, but discovered it as a teenager that I was gay. But those two realities didn't really mix well. And early on, the church and my parents tried to change me, and for whatever reason, I was convinced that something was terribly wrong with me. So any kind of marginalization that anyone feels, this story is for them. It's about a little boy. The character's name is Hopeful, who it parallels real life with me. But this little boy, Hopeful, moves into a dream home with his mom, his dad, and his two sisters, and there's a crabapple tree in the backyard, and he falls in love with the tree. But some people in the neighborhood come and say to the mommy and daddy, why do you have that tree in your yard? It's not a real apple tree. It doesn't grow real apples. You need to cut it down and replace it with a real apple tree. Mm-hmm. You want real apples. And the story is about how the tree is cut down. The mommy and the daddy and even Hopeful agree that they need to get rid of it. It's cut down, but it reappears every year. And For 25 years, the mommy and the daddy and even the character Hopeful agree with these other voices that they should cut the tree down, try to get rid of it, but it keeps coming back again and again and again. But over time, Hopeful starts to realize this isn't working, and after 25 years, he's no longer a little boy, and he stands in front of the tree and says, I love you, you give me real apples. And he speaks to the people who come to murder his tree and says, no, you're not going to kill my tree anymore, I'm not going to let you. This tree gives me real apples. An apple is an apple is an apple. Leave my tree alone. And so the voices go away. And that's essentially the story of the crabapple tree and what happens in it.
Wow, what a really powerful story, especially for kids. And, you know, you were mentioning that the book is for kids who feel marginalized and, you know, however they feel marginalized and excluded. But as you're talking about the story and as you're talking about who the book is for, I couldn't help thinking that the story is really for everyone. Because just as important as it is for a kid who feels marginalized to understand that they are beautiful and they have purpose and they have wonderful talents and gifts that will make the world a better place, it's also important for the rest of the world to kind of understand that too, so that they can start looking at people who are marginalized in a different way and start seeing them, seeing the humanity in every single person.
Yeah, Joe, that's right. Absolutely. And so it's an allegory. So the main character is Hopeful, but the voices that come by to speak to the family, I call them in the book the vexing voices, V as in Victor, vexing voices. And there's two sides to them in the story. There's these like well-intentioned side, but then there's also kind of a mean side to them. And the story is really about learning not to listen to those voices, but to listen to the greatest voice. And that greatest voice, I leave it up to the reader to decide who or what that greatest voice is. It could just be the voice of love. For me, it was the voice of my Creator, and how as a young boy, I established a relationship with my Creator and have maintained that relationship for years. And that greatest voice is the voice that I need to always listen to. So I think you're right. It's not just for kids. It's for all of us.
And that's one of the beauties of this podcast, is that it's just reminded me that there are so many kids, quote unquote, kids books that really are for all of us. And you don't have to, a book doesn't have to be 700 pages long with big fancy words and to be meaningful. There are plenty of children's books that have been very meaningful in my life and that I go back and read and refer to. And one of the joys of reading with my kids was, that relationship and that bond, but also was reacquainting myself with some of the stories that meant so much to me when I was a kid.
Yeah, it's so true. And I actually have kept a couple of the books that I read as a child, and they're still on my shelf in my house because they meant so much to me. And even as an adult, I will go back to them and read excerpts from them that were very meaningful to me and that inspired me as a kid, and they still inspire me as an adult. So you're absolutely right.
Yeah. Talk a little bit about the reaction that you've received from writing The Crabapple Tree.
It's been really, really wonderful. I have many reviews on Amazon. Some of them are people I don't know. And there are a few people who said that the book brought them to tears when they read it. A few adults said, as I was reading, one woman said, as I was reading this to my children, I was brought to tears. And just really, really very positive response, in my reviews. People saying that it was inspiring, not just as they read it to their kids or they read it with their kids, but as you're saying, people found it inspiring for them, for themselves.
Now, you were mentioning that, this brought back memories and of you growing up gay, and you and I are probably in the similar age range. Attitudes have really changed. Could this book have been written? Well, it could have been written, but could this book have been published when we were kids back in the 60s, 70s, early 80s?
Well, interestingly enough, in the 1970s, when I was in my 20s, I was a Christian school principal. I was completely in the closet and felt like if I came out, that I would lose my job. And I believe I would have lost my job. I ended up leaving my job very much in part because of the inner conflict that I could no longer deal with. And that's part of what I'm talking about when I say there's pain in the story, that there were just so many years of this inner conflict trying to reconcile faith and sexuality. But I don't think I could have published it as an emerging Christian leader. I don't think I could have published it and associated it with the pain that I was feeling at the time. I wasn't aware of anything like this growing up, but you're right. There's so much has changed. In fact, I had a Meet the Author event over the weekend on Saturday, like a celebration of the launch of this book. And a person who was my therapist, who was trying to help me change my sexuality during that long period of time, came to the event. And he is actually represented in the book as one of the vexing voices that was trying to convince me that I should change. But he came because he has changed his views. He's no longer tries to convince people to change. And so it was just an odd but wonderful time to be together and to realize things really have come a long way. Things have changed.
They really have. And a lot of you brought up being the principal of a Christian school, and there's still a lot of people, Catholics, Christians, folks, and Muslims, who have some very strong religious views on homosexuality, and to me, anytime that comes up in a conversation with me, it's I'm like, well, that's your attitude, but as a parent, I think the only message you should be giving to your kids about somebody who is gay is that is a person that deserves to be loved, absolutely deserves to be respected. And so that's one of the reasons I'm so happy that you're on the show, is because I think that's beyond whether you think it's a choice or something that you're born with, if it's against your religious idea or whatever. The main thing we need to teach our kids is that a person is a person and deserves our love and respect, period.
Absolutely. And I've gone to the same church, actually, in Jamaica Plain for almost 30 years. And it is still a relatively conservative church. And the main denomination of the church has a position that is, you could say, is anti-gay. And there are many people in my church that I have known for almost that entire 30 years. Some of them I sang at their weddings. I prayed for one couple who couldn't conceive, and now they have 3 children. And these people they have a position that says we stand for traditional marriage and we don't agree with the homosexual lifestyle. But Tom, we love you. Can we still walk together as friends? Can we still love each other but disagree? And it's really, really hard, Jedley, but we do it. Because I don't want to run away from them. They're some of the deepest, most meaningful relationships I've ever had in my entire life. And they don't want to run away from me either. And so we're learning to walk together and learn to love each other and not necessarily agree. It's hard, but it's worth it.
It is, and that's something that I think is really missing today. And it's not just, people just don't have these disagreements about sexuality, but it's Republican, Democrat. It seems like we can't have a discussion anymore. And if you don't believe every single thing that I believe in, then you can't be on my team, and I don't want you in my life, and you're an evil person. And that's, to me, it's just crazy.
Yeah. I sometimes say that it was like growing up in no man's land, the place between the borders of 2 countries that are constantly at war. And they're shooting at each other, and I lived in the trenches of no man's land. wanting desperately to live in both countries, but I felt like I wasn't welcome in either. And now I'm learning to live in both. Mm-hmm. I'm learning that, I have all my gay friends in the Boston Gay Men's Chorus who say, how can you be with those Christians? And I have my Christian friends saying, how can you deal with all those gay men? Well, I stand here on the bridge and I want to bring you together. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Please, let's love each other. Like you said, it's really about love. It's not about turning away from each other and turning our backs to each other. It's about loving each other and learning how to do that even if we don't agree with each other.
Yeah. I want you to expand a little bit more on something that's very important to me. As a Christian, as a Catholic, my relationship with God is more important than me being a Christian or a Catholic. And that might sound weird to someone because they're like, what do you mean? But talk a little bit about forming a relationship with your Creator, please.
Sure. So I was 14 years old and well, actually, I'll go back to 12. My mom had a very, very serious problem with addiction, with alcohol, and she smoked. She was a cigarette smoker, but the alcohol was pretty severe. And she had this encounter with God. My aunt introduced her to God, and something happened, something really powerful, and she stopped drinking and smoking on the same day. And it was a very, very definitive moment in her life. And my sister and I watched her for 2 years because she had tried to stop and couldn't. But over the 2-year period, and from the age of 12 to 14, her life really, really was transformed. Mm-hmm. And so at the age of 14, they sent me to a camp in Maine, a Christian camp for boys. And at the end of the week, they were talking all week about having a relationship with God. You can have a relationship with God, with your Creator. All you have to do is ask for it. And at that last night at the campfire, they said, if you want to do that, take a stick and throw it in the fire, and your counselor will know that you want to have that relationship and will speak with you. And I white-knuckled a stick while I was sitting there in the dirt by the fire, and I was too afraid to throw it in, and I didn't. But when I got home from camp the next day, I went into my bedroom and I just knelt beside my bed and I said, God, if you're real, if you're there, I want to be your friend. I want you to be my friend. I want you to know that I love you. And so at that moment, from that moment on, from the age of 14 until today, I've just had this close and intimate relationship and an awareness that I am loved by something much bigger than me.
And that is absolutely beautiful. And that is what I wanted my kids to grow up with, and I think now that they're adults that they have, and it's I have a similar story, and to me the church, the synagogue, the mosque, if they can help us connect with God, awesome, but that's a tool, And I think, and I know people are going to get angry because a lot of people, it's reverse, and it's like, God helps us connect with the church. And it's like, the church is meant to help us connect with God and to discover God. And this, like you just said, to discover that God loves us and made us. Yeah. Beautiful, beautiful. Well, now that you've written The Crabapple Tree and you've received all these accolades and you're getting this great response, has the bug bitten you again? Are you looking to write more and more children's stories?
Well, I am thinking about writing another story with this character, Hopeful, about a garden and some seeds that were not content being in the garden where they were planted, and refused to go into the soil because they were not content. And they wanted to go to another garden they heard about over the hill that was much better. So that's another story that may come as another chapter with this character, Hopeful. But I've begun working on a professional book about my 35 years as a resource development professional, a fundraiser for nonprofits, and that I think may be titled The Purpose of a Penny. And finding resources to fulfill mission is essentially the essence of the book. And I'm beginning to work on that.
Awesome. Well, that'll keep you busy for a bit.
I think so.
Well, we're real excited. Now, are there places online where folks can connect with you, find out more about you and the crabapple tree?
Yes, actually, I have the domain tomotoole.net. That's TOMOTOOLE.net is where you can find me.
Excellent.
That's my author website and information about the crabapple tree and a way to connect with me.
Wonderful, wonderful. Well, I think that the crabapple tree would be a beautiful addition to any family library, and we want you to check it out. We've been talking to the author, Tom O'Toole. Tom, it has been a pleasure. Thanks so much for being on the show.
Thank you so much for having me, Jet Li.
Please be sure to join us for the next edition of the Reading with Your Kids podcast. We'll be celebrating the 50th anniversary of man stepping on the moon. That's right, the 50th anniversary of the moon landing. And we'll be celebrating that with Karen Jameson. Please, you do not want to miss this show. If you are the author of a great children's book, we would like to introduce you to our Reading with Your Kids Certified Great Read program. One of the things that surprises so many authors is that when they finish their book, they discover that their job has just begun. That they, in fact, they magically transform from an author to a marketing director, because authors, especially indie authors, are responsible for marketing their book. And that is very, very difficult because there are thousands and thousands of books that are published every year, and it's hard for even the best book to stand out amongst that crowd. Well, the Reading with Your Kids Certified Great Read program, we developed this program to allow parents to see that your book is worthy of their consideration. We've established a team of evaluators, parents, kids, teachers, and if they believe that your book is worthy of 4 or 5 out of 5 stars, it becomes a certified great read. And with that certification, with that status, comes a number of different promotional tools that'll help you let the world know just how great your children's book is. You can check it out today. Go to our website, readingwithyourkids.com. Want to thank the people who made today's show so wonderful. Of course, our guest, Tom O'Toole. Make sure you check out his very, very powerful book, The Crabapple Tree. We also want to thank our sponsors, Elaine, Kylie Kearns. Check out Noasaurus. We want to check out Kid Curated Books. It's a really unique and fun monthly subscription service that creates a box full of books specifically for your child. A very, very unique program. And we also want to thank Dawn Minge, Dr. Dawn Minge, the author of the Queen Vernita Visitor Series. Check that series out, too. I want to thank my amazing producer, Fatima Khan. Thank you, Fatima, for all that you do for the program. Don't miss her blog. It's up on readingwithyourkids.com. I also want to thank my beautiful wife for all the support that she gives me. And, of course, I want to thank you. Thank you for taking the time to subscribe to the show on the iHeartRadio app, on Spotify, Himalaya, Podcast Addict, Podbean, iTunes, Stitcher Radio, wherever you find your podcast. And I also want to thank you most of all for taking the time to make the world a better place. And you do that every time you read with your kids. I'll be looking for the next edition of the Reading with Your Kids podcast.